Marhaban, my name is Ian Campbell. This series of 6 videos is the third series in a whole set of videos explaining the basics of how to speak, read, and write Al-Fusha or Modern Standard Arabic. These 6 videos will explore how to create simple sentences. This is much more complicated in Arabic than in English. This 6th and final video will talk about how we can flip the halves of a sentence to give us English there is, there are, which will also enable us to say to have, which in Arabic is not a verb. And I need to be super clear about that. To have is not a verb in Arabic, and I'll get to this in a moment. We call this al-khabar al-muqaddam, the fronted predicate. The word muqaddam, the qaf dal mim root, has a ton of words associated with it, and all of them have to do with moving something forward. So it really means like the khabar that has been moved forward, but in English we just call it fronted predicate. Certain sentences in Arabic will flip the order of the mubtada and khabar, putting the khabar first and then an indefinite mubtada. And I've put indefinite in green here because this is really key to making these sentences work. The effect of this is to give us English there is, there are, even though there is no actual word for there is, there are in standard Arabic. All of the dialects have their own word for it, and they're going to work more or less like English does. But formal Arabic, standard Arabic, works by this backward order of sentences. It's really not all that difficult to learn. It's just a little bit weird at first. So you have to infer the existence of a there is, there are through the preposition at the beginning. And it's the fact that these begin with prepositions that is the dead giveaway, that this is this kind of sentence. So fil ghurfa, in the room, a student. Ala al-kursi, on the chair, qatta, a cat. Amam al-maktaba, in front of the library, thalathat rijal, 3 men. So there's no there or is or are in any of these sentences. However, by the fact that it's begun with the preposition, which tells you it's got a khabar muqaddam, a fronted predicate, we can understand how these sentences work. So literally, in the room, a student, of course there's no a, on the chair, a cat, in front of the library, 3 men. But what we do is we reword these when we translate them into English, and we put there is a student in the room, or there is a cat on the chair, or there are 3 men in front of the library. And I've put the there is and there are in brackets right here, so you could see that you have to be the one to place that there, because there's no actual Arabic word that's an equivalent to there is, there are in the standard language. Again, all the dialects will have their own version of this. So we can look at some other sentences here. We could say khalf al-bayt hadika, behind the house, a park or garden. Ba'd saf, after the class, or after class we'd say in English. Hafla kabira, a big party, go for it. Qabla as-saf, before the class. Muhadara, a lecture. So if we just translate these directly, what we'll wind up with is behind the house is a garden. And we're going to say in English, and I've taken the brackets out here, there is a garden behind the house, or there's a big party after class, or after the class, we say in Arabic. There's a lecture before class. Once again, there's no word here for there, or for that matter for is or a, because Arabic likes to be complicated and opaque about these things. But it's really not that hard to figure out. When you see a sentence that begins with the preposition, once you recognize your prepositions, which is another good reason to learn them, that means you have a khabar muqaddam. And what you're going to do is flip them back and put there is or there are in front of the whole sentence in order to translate these into idiomatic English. Not difficult, just different from the way that English works. It's really common to use a pronoun right after the preposition, and usually you'll need context to know what the pronoun refers to, so these examples are kind of dragged out of nowhere. I could say fiha tolib wahid, in whatever this ha stands for, presumably we already know, one student. Or alayhi, on top of or against it, again we don't know what the it is, qitta na'ima, a sleeping cat. Amamaha, again, we don't know what the ha is right now, but up here we're referring to the maktaba. So in this kind of sentence, presumably we've already detailed what this pronoun is going to stand for. So amamaha thalathat rijal. So we can say there's one student in it, whatever the it is. There's a sleeping cat on it, again, whatever the it is. there are three men in front of it. So it's very, very common to have the noun that goes after the preposition replaced by a pronoun once you've established what it is you're talking about in multiple sentences. And then you'll see this kind of thing all the time. And one of the biggest barriers to understanding how to read Arabic fluently is, what is that pronoun referring to? Because sometimes it's a little opaque from an English speaker's point of view. It's not that hard. And in the second iteration of these online classes, I'll go through a lot of written texts and show how the pronouns relate to nouns. But for now, we're going to deal with really simple sentences. If we use the preposition inda in this manner, we get English to have. And here we have again in green. It is not a verb in Arabic. It's not going to behave like a verb. You're not going to conjugate it like a verb. You're not going to negate it like a verb. You're not going to put it in the past tense like a verb. And so I really, really need to emphasize from the start, if you can remember that to have is not a verb in Arabic, then you'll go much further, much more quickly than if you keep mistaking it for a verb. So we can use this preposition. Ind means like at or with or next to. We could say ind al-ustad qatatan. So at or with the professor, two cats. Inda ukhti wajibat. So wajib by itself means duty. Haha, he said duty. But when we make it plural, it usually means assignments or homework. So at my sister, homework. At the student, imtihan, an exam or test. So we could translate these literally. At with the professor, two cats. At with my sister, homework. At with the student, an exam. So that's how we translate them literally, but that's really not what we mean. What we mean is the professor has two cats. And just like there's no word for there isn't a direct word for has in this sentence. Instead, we're saying at the professor, two cats, but what we really mean is the professor has two cats. At my sister, homework, what we really mean is my sister has homework. At with the student an exam, we really mean the student has an exam. So a lot of times in Arabic, you can translate the words literally, and then you have to do kind of a next level translation to reword it into proper English. And this goes backwards as well, taking a proper English sentence and wording it into Arabic. Because the word order is different and the way we look at things is different. It's really not that difficult at all to learn, but it's badly taught most of the time. And here's the example that I'll give you. So we'll say, Indi sayara jadida. So here's and again, but now I've put a pronoun on it. So indi. So we're used to the e meaning me or my, and that's what it means here. At me, a new car. And that's what it means literally. Hal indek kalb? Yes, no question. At you, a dog. Indahum beit jamil jiddan. And remember, this word looks like jada, but it's not. It's jiddan. It's an adverb, which means it doesn't change form for gender or number. Jiddan is just jiddan. So we could translate these literally and get at with me a new car. Yes, no, at with you a dog. At with them a very lovely house. But that's not really what we mean. What we mean is, I have a new car, or do you have a dog, or they have a very lovely house. So a lot of times if you've got a kind of bad pedagogy or textbook or whatever, it'll tell you right near the beginning that indi means I have, which isn't false. It stands in for English, I have, but it's not a verb. And so what'll happen is a student who learns that indi means I have is going to go and try to negate it by negating it they would a verb, or putting it in the past tense the way they would put a verb in the past tense. And it's going to create all kinds of really garbled Arabic that people are going to look at you funny for. So learn from the start that ind-e means at with me. It's a preposition. It's not a verb at all. Indak means at with you. But we use them in Arabic in the places where we would use to have, which is a verb in English. So be very careful about this. Remember that to have is not a verb. And later on down the line, when you're trying to do things like change verb tense or negate it or ask questions, more difficult questions than this one, you won't run into nearly the same kind of gibberish and problems that you might otherwise. So be careful about that. When we use the preposition le in this manner, le usually means belonging to or for or in order to. This gives us to have for personal relationships. So I can say li zojati ucht. So belonging to my wife, a sister. In fact, she doesn't have a sister. I just use this as an example sentence. Li ustadna achawan. So two brothers. So to our professor, and because our professor begins with alif bihamza, when I put the lit before it, it changes it into the lam alif character. I could say lit taliba, and notice that when we put lit on the beginning of a word, it replaces the alif in the alif lam. So it looks like lil taliba. It's a lot of vertical lines in this word, but don't get confused. It's lit taliba, belonging to or for the student Habib. Habib is a beloved, literally, and we mean like boyfriend or partner. And then I say laha, and lit changes to la before a pronoun. So to her, Habiba, a girlfriend. And here's a new word, al-an. Al-an means right now or now. So literally we can translate these, and we could say to my wife, a sister, to our professor, two brothers, to the student, a boyfriend, to her now, a girlfriend. And that's what they mean literally. But le, for when we put it with a pronoun and in this kind of sentence, it usually means to have for personal relationships. So we say, my wife has a sister. Our professor has two brothers. The student has a boyfriend. She has a girlfriend now. Guess she found the boyfriend listening to Jordan Peterson or whatever. Girls don't put up with that. All right, so what this means is we can use lit to mean to have for a personal relationship. If we said in the zojati ucht or in the habiba al-an, if we used this version of quote to have unquote for this, everyone would completely understand you. If you said in the habiba al-an, they would completely get it. She's got a girlfriend now. It just sounds a little better and more classy if you use the preposition lit for personal relationships instead of the preposition and. They'll substitute out pretty well. Don't really worry about it. It's kind of in here for completeness purposes. So if we want to negate one of these sentences that has to have, again in quotation marks because it's not a verb, just put the word laysa, our verb for isn't, before the whole sentence. And it doesn't matter who has what, or rather who doesn't have what, I guess I really mean here. So we could say, Laysa indi mektab, isn't at me an office, or what we really mean is, or what, that's how it translates literally, isn't at me an office. Laysa lil ustad, and notice that I've replaced the alif in the alif lam of al ustad with the lam here. This is really common. It happens all the time, so please get used to it. So lil ustad, to the professor or at the professor. Ach, a brother. Laysa indaha habiba, there isn't at her a girlfriend. So it doesn't matter who's doing the having or what's being halved, if that's a word, what's being had, I guess I say in English. You just put laysa at the beginning of the sentence, and that negates the whole thing. Now, sometimes I've heard people say like, oh, habiba here is feminine, so I have to use the feminine singular version of layset at the beginning of the sentence. I should say layset in the habiba. But this is not used consistently at all. I see about 50-50 on these. So for your purpose as a brand new beginner, just put laysa at the beginning of the sentence, and it will negate the whole sentence, and everybody will get it. So what these mean is, I don't have an office. Again, there's no have here. The professor doesn't have a brother. She doesn't have a girlfriend. Just put laysa to negate the whole sentence. And this works with regular there are sentences as well. So I can say, laysa alal kursi qatta, isn't on the chair a cat. So what I really mean is, there isn't a cat on the chair. ليس في المكتبة مقهى. So there isn't in the library a coffee house. So maqha is a good word, the cafe, the coffee house. So, and I'm lying here, there is a cat on the chair. There's always a cat on the chair. But putting laysa before the sentence, no matter whether it's a preposition or a sentence with a khabar muqaddam that begins with a preposition used in the place of to have, or a khabar muqaddam where we're just using a regular preposition to describe the location of something, we're going to negate them all in the same way just by putting laysa before them. So that's a lot easier. And then finally, there's this word yujid for masculine or tujid for feminine, and put la before it. And this literally means is not found. And we can begin a sentence for there isn't any this way. And this is common in formal Arabic as well. So we could say la yujid maqha fil mektaba, isn't found a coffee house in the library. Or la tujid, because the qatta is feminine singular. So la tujid qatta fi dhalik al bayt. So is not found a cat in that house. And then of course what we mean is there's no cafe in the library. These two are just two different ways to get across the same point, and you now have two different models that you can use interchangeably, and that's a little confusing for you as a beginning student, but you'll like it better later on. And then la tujid qatta fi dhalik al bayt, there isn't a cat in that house, which is a crying shame. There should be a cat in that house. So, mabruk alaikum, we've now gone through this series of 6 videos teaching you how to make what we call basic nominal sentences in Arabic. In subsequent series of videos, I'm going to elaborate on these themes and teach you other little building blocks that you can put in your sentences, like nouns that own each other and verbs and all kinds of other crazy stuff. But we'll go through them one at a time and carefully so you can understand things in detail and have models to create good Arabic sentences by. And on that note, I'm